The stream has started.
Hello, viewers. Welcome to the Austin Audits pre-show. Today we're going to be talking about a few different topics. So I'm going to recap the Eastside Parkway's EIS community conversation that happened last week. We'll talk about an item from the Eastside Parkways Coalition on the agenda. Then we'll run through the Common Council agenda. And then also going to talk about some breaking news this week about potential cover-up. I don't know if potential, but an actual cover-up between the Buffalo Police Department and the Erie County Sheriff. And then, talk about an event of an actual protest this week for justice and the exoneration of Geraldine Martin. And that'll be it. Or maybe there'll be more. I don't know. You'll have to watch to the end to find out. So as always, drop a comment. And, looking forward to bringing you the news.
Twitch has accepted the stream.
Yay, Twitch.
YouTube has accepted the stream.
Yay.
Facebook has accepted the stream.
That's good to hear.
Would you like me to start the timer?
Yeah, so you can start the timer.
Okay, here we go. When it says on the air, you're on the air.
Okay. Hello, Think Twice Radio, and welcome to another episode of Austin Audits with me, the auditor. I'm Matthew Austin, and I am, the founding producer and, host of Austin Audits, where we audit local government and also, regional issues from a perspective that isn't Channel 2, 4, and 7. We're not allowed on cable, but we're allowed on Think Twice Radio, so we're grateful to have the opportunity to present our perceptions to you. And thanks for tuning in. So today we're going to be covering a couple topics. So I'm going to recap the Eastside Parkway's community conversation that I kind of previewed last week, and also maybe recap that event, and then also talk about an event or an item on this week's Common Council related to the Kensington Expressway project. Some corruption that's coming out in the Erie County Sheriff's, and an opportunity to perhaps protest the Erie County Sheriff. So let's get started. I want to start from the top, just kind of recapping some of my perceptions on the Eastside Parkway's community conversation that happened this past weekend at the Delvin Grider Community Center. So it was a great event, and we thank everybody that came out for coming out. And if you didn't come out, I guess that's why you're tuning in here to learn more. So essentially on Saturday, the Eastside Parkways Coalition held a community conversation at Delvin Grider, essentially having a couple different roundtable discussions on some of the different issues in the environmental impact statement. So those of you that may not be really up to speed on this project, essentially the New York State Department of Transportation, their Kensington Expressway project, which is essentially a proposed cap. So they're building a 3/4 mile cap over the current 33 or Kensington Expressway from essentially Best Street up to Sydney Street on the northern end. So essentially they're building a cap on this 3/4 mile highway, and the Eastside Parkways Coalition, along with some other entities, there was about 50 petitioners, and also organizations like the Western New York Youth Climate Coalition, the NYLCU or the NYCLU, essentially sued the state on multiple issues. But the big lawsuit win was essentially suing the NISDOT over the lack of an environmental impact statement on the Kensington Expressway. So an environmental impact statement is essentially an environmental study that is a pretty standard document that many, if not most, of construction projects in New York State comply with. Essentially, this environmental impact statement is essentially an in-depth study of the environmental impact that development projects have. And it was the Eastside Parkway's perceptions and opinion that the NISDOT did not comply with the law. And this past February, a judge finally ruled on the case and essentially agreed with the petitioners and said that the New York State Department of Transportation cannot move forward with the construction of the 3/4 mile cap and tunnel without producing an environmental impact statement. So that's kind of where we are recently. And right now we're in this holding pattern where we are waiting for really the next move by NISDOT. So the Eastside Parkways Coalition, we held this community conversation, essentially starting to get the conversation going around, what is an environmental impact statement? What needs to be in this EIS? And what would we like to see in this EIS? So it's really kind of this opportunity, just based on where we are in the project, to, one, inform the community. So really start to inform the community on some of the factual information regarding the Kensington Expressway and the environmental impact statement. And then two, really start to even further develop the coalition, the public coalition that is starting to build and gain momentum. So really this opportunity to kind of outreach to maybe people that have been on the sidelines or people that just are generally aware but wanted to learn more. And essentially that was the purpose of this event, was to start beginning, and I've said this on some previous shows, but start, the battle is slowly pivoting from a legal fight, and the legal fight is still ongoing. Don't get me wrong, there could be appeals, but essentially the battle is now pivoting from not just a legal fight, but from an actual PR battle, a public relations battle. So building public awareness, and essentially public consciousness over this project and some of the real issues that need to be grappled with. So in the Eastside Parkways community conversation, there was a few different tables and a few issues that were discussed. For example, there was a traffic study table, historic resources, so kind of looking at some of the resources and historic structures around the east side or around the Kensington. There was a community benefit agreement table, so actually looking at the community benefit agreement that we would like to see as part of this $1.5 billion construction project. And a couple others. I was actually facilitating and helping to facilitate the health impact assessment. So that's kind of what I wanted to dive in now, is actually the health impact assessment. So I am not a health expert by any means, but I've been deep in the HIA, which is the technical term for a health impact assessment. So I've been deep in the wormhole kind of researching an HIA. So I wanted to, I think I'm maybe best prepared at this point to dive in a little bit into the HIA assessment. So essentially, as part of the environmental impact statement, one component of that could be, and we think should be, an actual long-term health impact assessment. So I've been researching HIAs, and essentially an HIA, or health impact assessment, is essentially a study that would look at, one, what is the current health of the affected community, and then two, right, especially in an EIS where we want multiple different options considered, what are the long-term health impacts of one, the state's current proposal of the cap and tunnel, and then also what would be the potential long-term effects of, in our view, our preferred plan, which is an actual full restoration of Humboldt Parkway, actually removing the highway completely and returning it to its original design, which was a tree-strewn emerald necklace, is what I think they technically called it in the Olmsted terms. But essentially, it was the crown jewel of the Olmsted Parkway system, which was a really long stretch of trees that connected Delaware Park to MLK Park. So essentially, a health impact assessment would study that deeper, and the health impacts of one, the Kensington Expressway. I think I've had the good fortune of speaking to some epidemiology professors at the University at Buffalo to try to really start to grasp what would be in an HIA. And essentially what I've learned is that there is no kind of standard HIA template that you can kind of apply to this project. Essentially, each HIA is unique because each one, right, is studying different health issues, different causal impacts of health in different geographies, different projects. So essentially, from my research, what it seems like an HIA, what we really want to focus on is one, the traffic-related air pollutants. So that's a technical term. I think they call it TRAP technically. But traffic-related air pollutants are essentially some of the chemicals that are created by exactly what it says, but traffic. So I think one of the most well-known TRAP or traffic-related air pollutants is particulate matter, which is generally referred to as two types of particulate matter, PM 2.5 and PM 10. And essentially, PM is just particulate matter, but 2.5 and 10 are just essentially describing the granularity of the side of the particles. So 2.5, I think it's 2.5 micrometers, and 10 is 10 micrometers. So what is a micrometer? I think that's called a micrometer, but essentially, I think to dumb it down to the highest level, essentially what PM 2.5 and PM 10 is, they're just extremely small, fine, granular particles. So I think PM 2.5, for example, is like multiple times, I think it's like 30 times thinner than a human hair. So very small particles that are created by traffic. And essentially it gets into the air. And essentially there is no safe level of PM. So essentially any level of particulate matter that human beings are exposed to is bad and negative. And obviously the higher the amount or concentration of it, the worse it is. Because essentially these really small, really fine particles, you breathe them in, you inhale them, and they get into your bloodstream, and they just cause lots of issues because they're so small. And I think society-wise, I think we're just starting to learn. I think it's really not many people are aware of. But I think even when you think of things like microplastics, but I think we really do not understand fully the ramifications of some of the really small, really fine particles that are really damaging to human health, right? I think we all see oil spills, and we see the eels and the otters covered in grease, and we instantly know that's terrible. And it is terrible, but we see, right, I think the stereotype of, right, the six-pack beer where the plastic six-pack rings get thrown in the ocean and then some fish gets stuck in it and dies, which is, bad, and it is bad, but at least you can visually see the impact, right? It's startling. But I think with particles that are so small, right, PM 2.5, PM 10, and other traffic-related air pollutants that are extremely fine, you can't see. There's no jarring image that can be seen. It's really kind of this insidious, like, wicked problem that it's really this really small thing that we can't see. And because we can't see it, it's really hard to grasp just how detrimental it is. But essentially, traffic-related air pollutants, I think, would need to be the main focus of an HIA. So not just particulate matter, but things like dioxide and lots of chemical technical terms that I'm not super hip to, but essentially, nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, all these chemicals that are put into the air by traffic are extremely damaging to human health. And essentially, I mean, when you look at the health outcomes of the east side more broadly, but specifically the area right by the Kensington Expressway, the neighborhoods there have some of the worst health outcomes. And terrible health outcomes such as length of life. So the people in that neighborhood actually have shorter lifespans. They have experienced higher rates of asthma, heart disease, cancer, all types of bad things. And right, obviously it's a multivariate equation. There's lots of reasons for that. But we think one of the things that's not helping is the actual highway. One of the epidemiology professors, he was talking about how there's actually data, right? I think it's LiDAR data, or actually satellite technology. They can actually look at images from, say, the 70s, 80s, and kind of see what the levels were back then. And I think just from some of my rudimentary research into particulate matter, I think society in large has actually made great progress in cutting down on particulate matter. But some of the particulate matter levels, I think back in the 70s and 80s were really just absolutely horrendous. And one thing I've learned talking to epidemiology researchers and professors is actually, one of the things in epidemiology and disease, right, is it's not an immediate feedback. So, right, you smoke a cigarette today doesn't mean you get cancer tomorrow. It really, some of the things are very delayed. So, essentially, based on that kind of understanding of like disease has on this time delay, some of the diseases and some of the cancers, heart attacks, length of life, some of the early premature deaths that we're seeing today were really the root of that is back in the 70s, 80s when, right when there was a lot more traffic going on the Kensington and people were driving vehicles that, right, were much more pollutant than some of the vehicles we see today. And I know myself, I've been the proud owner of a 1977 Dodge van, and it's a very cool van on multiple levels, right? It's hip, it's vintage, it's a cool van. But one of the things that is not cool about it is it's really just really gassy. And right, that's just one van. If you think of that was kind of the standard of all vehicles, yeah, I think it could be concluded that some of the high particulate matter and high pollutants back in the 70s, 80s, decade of the past are now those impacts are being felt today. So I really think any health impact assessment would need to be focused on specifically traffic-related air pollutants and particulate matter. But I also think not just that, but also actual water. So I'd love to see water added as it. I think one of the things that isn't too well known is that the reason why the Kensington Expressway project terminates where it does, which is at Sydney Street on the northern end, is actually because the Scajaquada Drain is directly below there. So what is the Scajaquada Drain? So the Scajaquada Drain is this massive drain pipe underneath the highway. I think it's like 8 or 9 feet wide. I mean, it's big enough that human beings could walk through it. But essentially the Scajaquada Drain is a drain that it ends up going out at the sewer authority plant on, I think it's on Bird Island or over right by the river there. But essentially the Scajaquada Drain is part of this larger regional watershed. So actually some of the water that, lands on a street in Cheektowaga, for example, goes into a drain, and that drain then goes through the Scajaquada Drain. So really, when you think of the region's watershed is right underneath the Kensington. So I definitely have concerns of how this project might affect the waterway, and are any of the chemicals going to make their way into the region's watershed? I think that's something to be studied. So that's kind of right. I think, yeah, any study would need to focus on traffic-related air pollutants in water. And I think some of the outcomes that I'd love to see studied in the HIA would be, studying some of the health outcomes that the data shows. So, for example, heart disease, cancer, asthma, shorter length. I think it needs to be studied of why this neighborhood actually is experiencing higher rates of that. And is it related to the Kensington? And if so, how much of it is related to the Kensington? And I was able to sit down with some epidemiology professors from UB, and I think one of the cool ideas that they came up with for the HIA, because essentially we're just trying to get an understanding of, best practices in health impact assessments. So really, I think two really good suggestions they had was, one, is there a similar neighborhood that had similar characteristics that wasn't impacted like the Humboldt Parkway neighborhood was. So that's kind of, right, you could kind of do this A/B testing of, especially in science, right, when you're studying things, you're trying to study, different groups. You're trying to study essentially groups that didn't have a stimulus and groups that did, and then you can come to the conclusion in kind of research of how the stimulus, what its impact had, if you can kind of find two similars. I think just based on that kind of recommendation, they'd love to study an area that wasn't impacted. I think some of the initial ideas that we had was maybe actually looking at, right, I think just from that feedback, we thought, maybe the Bidwell Parkway neighborhood would be a good neighborhood to focus on, because essentially the Bidwell Parkway over near the Elmwood Village is very similar from a built environment perspective of the Humboldt, right? The emerald necklace, if you will, of the Olmsted Parkway is still intact today. And not only does that have positive economic impacts, right? I think, especially as we're in March here, hitting spring, it's really awesome to see, right, that there's going to be farmers markets on Bidwell Parkway again. There's going to be, people with hula hoops and street dancers and all sorts of public activities on that parkway, and that just isn't obviously possible on Humboldt Parkway because it was removed. So not just economic, but right, even when you look at housing values, the houses over kind of by the Lafayette traffic circle and on Billable Parkway, those houses just have greater economic value, which one, higher assessed value means they pay more in taxes, which means it supports the operations of the whole city, versus the houses on Humboldt who, I think it's pretty apparent that, if any human was given the choice, would you want to live next to a parkway or live next to a highway? I think most people would pick the parkway, right? Just because of the natural characteristics that it gives. So that's kind of obvious from the health or from the economic point of view, but it'd be interesting to see if, right, health impacts, right? If you had two neighborhoods that both had an Elmwood or had a Olmsted Parkway, one was kept intact, the other was removed and had a highway installed. So what do the health impacts look like on those two neighborhoods, and how do they differ? So that's one thing. Also, maybe studying another area similar on the east side, but I was thinking maybe an area like Broadway in Bailey. So maybe an area that has similar economic and demographic characteristics, but is it kind of located farther away from highways? What makes sense? I think that's one issue, and also another issue is looking at best practices. So maybe I think one of the things we'll have to do for the East Side Parkways is actually start researching health impact assessments in more largely environmental impact statements on highway removal. So I know I'm curious in looking at Rochester's Inner Loop project to see what their EIS looked in, and did they have or a health impact assessment as part of that project. I don't know. That's something I have to do more research in. But yeah, potentially looking at, right, what are some of the best practices and what are some similar projects that had health impact assessments. So that's kind of the recap of the event. And I think, I don't know if it's public knowledge, but I'll be announcing it here. There's actually going to be a second community conversation in April. So essentially in April, the East Side Parkways will be presenting a few 1 to 2 page research white papers, kind of taking some of the feedback we gathered at the community event, but then also some of our own research that we've done. I think, right, I'm just one member that's been on one of the topics, but we have a really dedicated group of volunteers. I think everyone besides maybe a few of the lawyers have made a dime off this, but we have some really passionate community researchers that have been on the other topics, deeper in many regards to some of the topics than I have in HIA, because I've just been in the wormhole for 2 weeks. So I'll have some more updates as we get closer, but in April you can expect a second community conversation with some actual proposed white papers, which I'm really looking forward to. So that is the East Side Parkways event, and with that being said, I think it's good now here to take a look at the actual council agenda. So one thing I wanted to look at here was this is tomorrow's council agenda, and I'm recording this on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. Everyone's Irish on St. Patrick's Day. But yeah, I wanted to look at tomorrow's agenda, and specifically item 25-510, which is concerns on the Kensington Expressway project. So actually the East Side Parkways, we're excited to announce that we were able to get on the council agenda, which is no small feat. I think you'll see here we have this item dated December 5th, 2024. And essentially we had an item here that we tried filing in December, but was never put on the council agenda for some reason or not. So we were able to get this item through, but essentially we're just asking here for an opportunity. So this was a letter from the East Side Parkways, our executive director and parliamentarian, essentially writing on behalf of the East Side Parkways Coalition to respectfully request an opportunity to speak at the upcoming community development meeting scheduled for December 17th. So right now, so it says our coalition seeks to speak with the council about the New York State Department of Transportation's Kensington Expressway project occurring within the city of Buffalo. We have gathered valuable insights from local residents, and we would like to present our perspective on how the project can be re-envisioned to better serve the needs of our community. We look forward to the opportunity to engage in meaningful dialogue with the Common Council on this issue. Then we left our Gmail account. So, yeah, essentially the Eastside Parkways tomorrow we will be on the council agenda. So we're just asking for an opportunity to speak now at the community development. And I did watch the Common Council's caucus meeting, which was this afternoon, where essentially the caucus meeting is essentially just, right, the caucus meeting is just when they, go through the agenda and decide where the items are going to go to and kind of get prepped before the real meeting. And I'm cautiously optimistic because they did say in the caucus meeting this afternoon that the item was going to be sent to community development, which is really exciting because, residents of the Eastside Parkways and of the Eastside will finally have their chance to speak in the council chambers, which I think is it's due time. I think, especially now, as I had mentioned, the actual EIS ruling, we're in this kind of holding pattern, this opportunity to potentially pivot or potentially force the project in a new direction, which I think is very exciting. So we're asking people to, call their council members about item 25-510. And also just, call your council member, call a council member, call all of the council members if you can, and just tell them that you support highway removal and full restoration of Humboldt. Because I think the Eastside Parkways Coalition, we've been branded as kind of Johnny-come-latelys, which is true. The Eastside Parkways is a fairly recent creation of an entity. But, I think we're here now, and this is our time to speak, and we've I think earned our opportunity to speak before our elected officials. So really excited to just present some of our perspectives and at least maybe begin to engage in some meaningful dialogue with our local leaders who just haven't really, I think, taken the time to really get deep into the weeds of understanding the issue. It just feels like the project is really just been a top-down operation, right? It's a project that was kind of forced on residents from the governor, from the state DOT, and from the New York State Assembly Majority Leader. Was kind of just, told that, this is the project that the community is going to get and they're going to like it. And we're just really excited to potentially start engaging in dialogue with our elected officials. So that'll be tomorrow, and we're hoping that, to get to the community development meeting. And I'm sure next Monday I'll kind of do a briefing on the day before. And just really excited because I think Eastside Parkways Coalition, along with other residents of the city of Buffalo, we believe the State Kensington Expressway project is a city issue, and we want the city to take action. We'd love to see the Common Council adopt a resolution, which a resolution is just essentially a support letter saying that they support full restoration of Humboldt Parkway. So that's kind of in the short term what we want. In the medium term, we want to see the city of Buffalo become the lead agency on the Kensington Expressway project and actually take over lead agency status from the New York State Department of Transportation, because really the crux of the issue we're facing is that baked into the cake, if you will, and the actual scoping document of the project is NICEDOT's project objectives. And one of the, if not the most damaging project objective of NICEDOT is the actual maintaining of vehicular capacity. So that's kind of baked into the cake at the ingredient level at the very start. Is the objective of the project is to maintain vehicular capacity. And we feel like if you could remove that objective, that any solution needs to maintain vehicular capacity, we believe removing that specific objective could lead and would lead to the best project, which we think is the full restoration of Humboldt Parkway. So by doing full removal, we believe that it would, by full removal is the best. And the reason that full removal and full restoration of Humboldt Parkway is not being considered, it was never seriously considered, is because it doesn't meet the NICE project objective of maintaining vehicular capacity, right? If you remove a highway and plant trees there, while the people might be happy, the actual cars themselves will not be maintained. But we're of the thought that you could maintain vehicular capacity, just not vehicular capacity on the Kensington Expressway. But we believe, and I think the data backs this up, of actual the traffic could be rerouted onto the city's radial street pattern. So we believe that vehicular capacity could be maintained if you just rerouted it through the radial street system as the city was originally designed. So streets like Broadway, Genesee, William, those streets, one, were designed to handle much more capacity than they currently have, and two, have also really suffered greatly by the ability of the region's largely suburban population to bypass city neighborhoods via the Kensington. It's really robbed the radials, and especially Broadway, which at one point was the thriving economic business district of the city, right? It was a thriving street. And we believe that rerouting the traffic through the radials could help mitigate any of the negative traffic impacts. And that's just one reason, but I think, essentially, right, it's easy to get lost into all the different aspects of this project, but we believe, and we believe that the constraint that is constraining the project, and really ultimately this larger vision of really rebuilding Buffalo's iconic and world-class park system, which was in its original design, in order to fulfill that vision, given the constraint and the project objective that vehicular capacity needs to be maintained, that is preventing the actual restoration of Olmsted's world-class park system from ever being restored, because the park does not maintain vehicular capacity. So we believe, kind of right at its core, we'd love to see the city become lead agency status, which is essentially what the City of Rochester Inner Loop project did. So the City of Rochester Inner Loop was a similar highway removal project, and the City of Rochester actually was instrumental in getting that done, because they engaged in research and planning, so that when they did get a grant to do highway removal from NICE, they were able to take over ownership. And that's kind of one of the larger issues, is that the City of Buffalo has been dragging its feet for decades now, and wasn't able to meet the moment. So we'd like to see that change, and we'd like to see the City of Buffalo take an active role in restoring the parkway, and helping remove maintaining vehicular capacity from the actual vision of the project, because we believe that the City of Buffalo and the Kensington Expressway, we believe in a vision much bolder than maintaining vehicular capacity. And really now is the time to really start implementing and inflicting this vision of a city, because if we build the Kensington Expressway cap and tunnel as it is, one, it will continue to divide the City of Buffalo for another generation, and two, it kind of sets in stone that the east side will never be connected to Delaware Park, because, as I had mentioned earlier, the Scajacquada Drain is at the northern terminus of the Kensington Expressway project. And while Governor Hochul has stated that she will begin, and NICE will begin studying how to connect, a potential phase 2 or phase 3 of actually going further to connect, that has not been studied. And actually, as members of the East Side Parkways, we're skeptical that that's even technically feasible, given that the Scajacquada Drain is there, and that if you actually are intending to fully connect Delaware Park to MLK Park, given the real world technical physical constraints of Scajacquada Drain there, before a shovel is put in the ground, that needs to be studied. The full connection needs to be studied before you build these phases in, because, right, I think we've all done just small scale, right, home construction projects, and I think we all know that lack of planning, right, once you get a third of the way in the project, it's harder to kind of backtrack and redo it. So we think that full restoration and full connection needs to be studied. You can't kind of piecemeal it and worry about how you'll overcome the Skidjackwada drain later on once, you know, you're already $1 billion and blasting has begun. So, yeah, that's some of the Eastside Parkways items. And yeah, just encourage anyone to call your council members and also show up to this week's regular meeting or next week's community development meeting. And just be present. Turn up, wear your emerald green, and yeah, let's start filling it in the tunnel. And we can't fill in the Kensington with dirt until we fill in the council chambers with green shirts. So yeah, wear your emerald greens and show up, and yeah, let's support full restoration of Humboldt Parkway. So now I wanted to pivot into essentially, I wanted to cover essentially this event, which is essentially a call to join us to demand justice for Geraldine and Martin campaign. So essentially, this is a group or an actual community event that is looking to exonerate Martin Sostre and Geraldine Pointer. So essentially, from my understanding, Martin Sostre was kind of a very outspoken social justice or advocate back in the 60s in Buffalo. And him and Geraldine Pointer were essentially, it appears to be framed and set up and wrongfully convicted. I think it was for possessing drugs, but essentially it looks like it was a frame up. And there's this amazing group, and yeah, if you just search Geraldine and Martin campaign on Instagram, essentially there's this group of advocates that are advocating to actually have Martin Sostre and Geraldine Pointer exonerated. So, yeah, on March 20th, 2025, so this Thursday, there's a rally at 2:30 p.m. So in Niagara Square in Buffalo, New York. And I believe the actual protest will be at the Erie County DA office. So I encourage, you know, anyone to show up to just support the exoneration of Geraldine Pointer and Martin Sostre. So on Martin's 102nd birthday, they're asking people to stand with the coalition to deliver a petition demanding that the Erie County DA, Michael Keene, exonerate Miss Geraldine Pointer of her wrongful conviction and imprisonment. So, unfortunately, Martin Sostre, I believe, passed away, but Miss Geraldine Pointer is still alive. So I think there's an opportunity to kind of right some of the injustice, and yeah, I think fully exonerate what appears to be a setup, because essentially at there's an Afro-Asian bookstore at the corner of Jefferson. I want to say it was Glenwood, but I think it's 1412 Jefferson. There was kind of this radical bookshop on Jefferson, and Martin Sostre, sorry. Oh. Okay. So essentially, Martin Sostre was really this critic, or I think they'd call him today like a social justice warrior, but he was really an outspoken, kind of a radical thinker. And I know he was African American, but he had a lot of, you know, radical literature that he not just wrote, but also had a bookshop which was kind of this hub, right? And we think of the 60s as, right, this radical kind of social, right? Social protest was kind of like the flavor of the 60s. And from my understanding, Martin Sostre was this, outspoken advocate. And he was really involved with, you know, education, especially educating young people. And it appears, from my understanding, that it looks like the Erie County DA or the Buffalo Police Department, essentially it seems like Martin Sostre and Geraldine Pointer, I think one day they were just closing up their bookshops, and essentially it appears that they were framed for possession of some drugs. I'm not sure exactly what they were, but they were arrested and they served time in prison. I actually believe Miss Geraldine Pointer served time in prison for a crime that she didn't convict. So while Martin Sostre has passed away. Geraldine Pointer is still alive. She's still kicking it, and I think there's a real opportunity to bring justice to someone, which I think, right, we can't go back in time and solve some of the injustices of the past, but we can right those justices today. And I think, it's just the right thing to do. So I really encourage anyone to come out to this event on March 20th and support the delivering of petitions to the Erie County District Attorney and ask him to exonerate Miss Geraldine Pointer while she's still alive and get her justice and clear her name from any wrongdoing, because it's the right thing to do, and because, as we've learned, I just think there's real issues in our criminal justice system. I mean, I think I've covered in depth some of the concerns I have with the Buffalo Police Department's reform agenda. But actually, I think the big news that happened this week was there was actually Channel 2 and Investigative Post. They did some reporting of actual corruption in the Erie County District Attorney's office. So actually, the Investigative Post has this story here. Essentially, there's a hit and run of the narcotics chief of police. So Daniel DJ Granville, who is the Erie County narcotics investigator. So this guy right here, back in last April, he was essentially, it appears that he was driving under the influence of something, although we don't know, and actually hit 7 different vehicles with a county pickup truck. It's unclear if he was on county time or if he was off the clock, but essentially he was, driving a county vehicle, hit 7 parked vehicles and actually totaled the county truck. There's actually pictures of it online where the actual front axle was in rough shape. DJ Granville, was driving under the influence, and we don't know because it appears that he was never tested for drunk driving. So actually, this case, I think, is starting to bring to light some of just the corruption and within the Erie County Sheriff's Department, because essentially it appears like it was a giant cover-up, because DJ Granville's sister-in-law is actually a Buffalo police lieutenant, and she was actually in charge of responding to this event. So actually, his sister-in-law, it appears, who signed off on some documents, essentially DJ Granville, I mean, one, he's still employed by the Erie County Sheriffs, and he has a salary of over $200,000. But he was able to plead down his, what's described as a traffic incident, into just a $150 jaywalking charge. So lots of questions because this is coming out, but essentially it's starting to show, right, some of the corruption in local law enforcement, where you have this Erie County detective and sheriff who was appears to be driving under the influence, because how do you hit 7 parked vehicles and total a truck if you're in a normal state of mind? But we don't know what his conditions are, because it appears while he was whisked away in a Buffalo police vehicle, he was not tested. There's no sobriety test, or it doesn't appear that was conducted. So very concerning to say the least, because then it appears that actually, right, some of the people whose parked cars were damaged ended up suing the county, and actually county taxpayer dollars were used to pay off those lawsuits, which is concerning, because if Mr. Granville here was drunk driving, and it appears there's some conflicting reports. I think the sheriff's office says he was on the job, but then there's been some reporting that he worked a shift from 7 to 3 and then collected overtime from 3 to 6, but then this accident was not till later on at midnight. So it's very unclear if he was on the clock, if he wasn't, but essentially he was driving a county vehicle, and county taxpayers are one, on the hook for covering the lawsuits of people whose property was damaged during this incident, and 2, right, the county vehicle that was essentially the taxpayer's vehicle, was totaled and auctioned off. So this is a developing story, and definitely kudos to Charlie Specht at Channel 2 and Investigative Post, who were instrumental in doing the digging and did the initial reporting and investigating. And it's I think this is a developing story. I think just since this news has come out, which it right, all the people in power said they didn't have any idea, never heard about it. Which you don't know. I don't know how any people in power, don't hear about something like this. But essentially, we have the Erie County Legislature, which has called for their own investigation of the handling. And then the Buffalo Police Department's Internal Affairs Unit is conducting an ongoing investigation to actually investigate DJ Granville's sister-in-law, who's the Buffalo Police Lieutenant. So looking at some of her actions following this incident to see if she followed the procedures. And I think it's pretty clear that some procedures were violated somewhere because, right, how does someone hit 7 vehicles and no sobriety test is conducted? So I think I just saw a story today that actual DJ Granville's brother, who's also a county sheriff 8 years ago, was in some other drunk driving accident. And yeah, I think even DJ Granville's right, his sister-in-law is then married to Carl Schultz, and Carl Schultz is appears to be one of the most corrupt police officers in the city of Buffalo. I think he's ranked number 6 with the number of internal affairs investigation. I know he was right. He was one of the officers in the Kistner case, where James Kistner was a pedestrian who was hit by a Buffalo police car, and then Carl Schultz appears to have covered that up as well. So I think if this is a ongoing investigation, I think it just kind of illuminates some of the just the nepotism and some of the corruption within law enforcement. I think bringing this back to the Geraldine Pointer case, right? How do people like Geraldine Pointer who are innocent get framed for crimes that they didn't commit? But then you have people today like DJ Granville who commit crimes, but their crimes go away because of one, the position they hold in the sheriff's department, and also I think some of the political donations, because DJ Granville's been a very prolific political donor to not just his boss, but also politicians. I think him and some of his family members have held fundraisers for the acting mayor, for many local politicians, and I think I just like to see, right, especially when you're making $200K on the taxpayer dime, especially if you're a sheriff or a police officer, right, integrity is like one of the most important things of your job, and it's just a privilege to be that job. And I don't think it just appears to be, some bad apples, and I think we all kind of agree that bad apples need to be removed from the police department because, one, they're bad apples, and because these bad apples then spoil the rest of the batch, and it kind of just stinks up the rest of the reputations of all the good officers. And I think most of them are good and do the right thing and go to work wanting to make a difference. And even, just last week I was on a dog walk and I had a couple kids come up to me just kind of yelling on their bicycles that there was some woman that was unresponsive. So they asked me to make a call. I actually called 911, reported it, and within 5 minutes there was 4 police officers there, a fire truck, and this young woman was in her car. I thought she was dead when I first saw her, but they narconned her back to life. And I think that was just, to me, really eye-opening of, just some of the good that doesn't get mentioned and some of the good work that police officers do. And when you just have cases like this, which is just blatant in-your-face corruption of, a 7-car hit and run, drunk driving, just pleaded down to 150 jaywalking, it really just tarnishes some of the good work that the men in blue do for us, right? They protect and they serve, and right, they're held to a higher standard. And I think, right, especially as Americans, we just we believe in the ideal of justice is blind and everyone being treated under the law. And obviously, I'm not naive to think that that's not fully true, but I think we can hold that aspiration in our hearts and in our minds. And I would love to see, a society where DJ Granville is held accountable for his crimes, and people like Geraldine Martin are exonerated or never even charged in the first place. But we're not there yet, and we have a lot of work to do. And the only thing we can do is act with where we are at this point of time. So I think that was really the biggest story, and we're definitely going to keep our eyes on it because it's concerning and it's going. We'll see where this can of worms leads us because, yeah, I think there's definitely more to this story, because yeah, there's just right. It's kind of the crux of the issue, which is just power, and especially with law and order being such a divisive political issue. Really just to see the county legislator come out and demand an investigation and begin one, I think is very promising. So I don't know if there's anyone other than maybe DJ Granville and his family himself who don't want to see justice in this case, because yeah, it's very disturbing, and I don't think, right, going back to the original point of we want to live in a colorblind society where justice, doesn't care about the color of your skin or who you know, but treats everyone fairly. And and we hope that justice is found for not just the victims, but the victims are not just the 7 people who had their cars hit, but also all taxpayers, because essentially we helped subsidize Mr. Granville for his midnight joyride that caused a lot of damage. So we got about 10 minutes here, so let's. I want to take a look through tomorrow's council agenda, because I haven't actually looked at it yet, but let's go through it and see if there's anything interesting in here. So tomorrow, the 18th, is a regular meeting, and at the regular meeting, essentially they go through items and really just send these items to different committees. So a lot of these are mundane things, but let's see if we can find any kind of things that stick out. So nothing's sticking on me. It looks like there's some change orders for DPW. Essentially, let's take a look at this 25-472. So Commissioners Report to the Common Council. So I see this PRI, which PRI is proactive rental inspections, which is getting a lot of attention because it appears that the city's really not enforcing proactive rental inspection. So essentially, before you are able to rent out a unit, it's supposed to be inspected and made sure that it's in compliance. So I think one example where this is really damaging is in lead paint. So especially units that have really young kids that live in them. If they live in units that have lead paint, a lot of times the kids, not knowing any better, will, put lead paint in their mouth, eat lead paint because maybe it tastes good. But yeah, it might be, it's just very damaging to developmentally and also to the developing brain. And actually children that ingest lead paint, mostly in Buffalo's case through lead paint, it actually causes irreversible brain damage, and you actually lose IQ points right, when you think about all the children in the city that are all losing IQ points, just the impact that has long-term to the economy, right? If you have, human beings with damaged IQ, it really dampens down the entire economy because, your economic vitality you're able to do with lower IQ, you need every IQ point you can get, especially in the emerging knowledge economy. So let's see if we can get this this item opened up, because this essentially looks like a commissioner's report, which I believe is the DPS commissioner. This says Commissioner's Report to the Common Council of the City of Buffalo as per city code, which during Byron Brown's regime, I never saw a commissioner PRI report, so I'm interested to read this. So this says, Dear Honorable Body, the Proactive Rental Inspection Program, PRI, has made significant improvements in the last year. Following the submission of last year's PRI report to the Common Council, the Department of Permit and Inspections, DPIS, worked collaboratively with the administration and the Common Council to implement key changes to the PRI ordinances. These revisions were aimed at strengthening the PRI program, and we are appreciative of the cooperative efforts that resulted in improved legislation. So prior to these changes, it's saying that PRI faced significant resource constraints, and I think that is true, right? One of the issues with, I know DPIS, and is they just don't have enough inspectors. I think just based on my time in the city, you have like one inspector that can be assigned to multiple census tracts, which are extremely large geographies that one person can't really cover. So I think part of the city's SAS Institute too, right? The SAS Institute was part of the police reform agenda, and really the first use of the consultant hours for the SAS Institute were not for police needs, but the city actually used those to develop an at-risk property dashboard for DPIS. So I believe it was kind of the city trying to use data to help inspectors do their job more effectively. So it looks like they're claiming that DPIS worked with civil service to recruit new inspectors. So it looks like they're claiming that the PRI is going better because training and development of new inspectors. So hired new inspectors. So yeah, different training. So on software systems, tenant landlord interactions, inspection procedures, independent inspections. So I don't know. I'm just looking through this. So the ongoing responsibility of the DPS PRI program. So performing PRI inspections neighborhood by neighborhood. So sending notices to tenants and landlords in designated census tracts, scheduling inspections, connecting requested inspections. So it looks like they're responding to 311 calls on 1 and 2 family rental units. I guess in here, just looking at this, I don't see anything. Oh, they have some data there. So they're showing, right, summary of the number of inspections performed by year, highlighting the growth of the PR program. So, right, it looks like they've, 2023 barely did any, but yeah, it looks like they're reporting on some data. I don't know. I think the PRI, and that's just something I'm learning, is just, how, right, I think the Common Council, they passed legislation around PRI, and then I think the city was actually sued because they were not following PRI, which is proactive rental inspection. So there's this issue of just how hard it's been in the past regime to really enforce laws and enforce laws in the books, which I know is a huge problem. I know I've been outspoken about actual civil service laws in the city that are being violated. It's very hard to get the city to comply with laws, because I think, just from my experience just battling the human resource establishment, the civil service department, it's really hard to compel the city to follow its own laws, just because the incentive is to not. So, you can sue them, you can bring public awareness through the media, but it's really hard to gather the political will to do things properly. And I don't know. I'm optimistic that this could change, but I'm not too sure. And yeah, it's just a hard issue. And I think there's some reporting too of just even the city's housing court, which has been in violation because there's essentially some kind of community committee that's supposed to be responsible for oversight, and that committee has not been formed for over 30 years. So I think even just that too, lack of enforcement has led to the housing court really just being this court for evictions, which is definitely the role of a housing court. But in addition to evictions, right, one thing the housing court should do is enforce safe living standards. Because again, if you have slumlords and landlords that are negligent in their property maintenance, and you have young kids being poisoned by lead, right, that is just as important or more important than someone potentially not paying their rent. So I don't know. I think just that reporting of a housing court really has turned into an eviction only court. One makes me think of, I don't know, just the general housing court in general, and maybe how that has been bought by maybe some of the developer class or some of the landlord class to really kind of do the beck and calling of landlords to evict people, but then not have safe living standards. And I think optimistic that another regime or another administration could actually prioritize actual enforcement of housing standards in the city, because lead poisoning is one of the most wicked problems in the city of Buffalo. One through old aging housing stock that has lead paint embedded in many old units. But also, another issue is actually in water. So actually, many water lines in the city are still lead. I had a friend who's an old school plumber, and he's kind of told me, as long as you don't shake up, right, and disturb the lead pipes, it's largely good. But as soon as you kind of go hacking or shaking up, that's when the little lead particles get in. But essentially, lead is just, it's right, and even coming back full circle to my kind of discussion of particulate matter, right, lead is just another substance which is, right, another chemical that is in kind of the modern human's experience, and is not good for human health. I mean, it has some industrial uses, but is not good to be ingested. And we'll see. So that's kind of, so to recap, we got about a minute here. Essentially, Eastside Parkways. Expect another community conversation in April. And the one in April will be presenting some actual white papers around the environmental impact statement. Especially excited to get to work on the HIA or Health Impact Assessment. Tomorrow, item 25-510 is on the Common Council agenda. So I urge everyone to attend tomorrow's council meeting and next week's community development meeting, or call the Common Council and just tell them that you support full restoration of Humboldt Parkway. And then, asking people to come out on Thursday, March 20th for delivering petitions to the Erie County District Attorney Michael Keene and asking for the full exoneration of Geraldine Martin and Martin Sostre. And that's kind of Austin Audit. So that is Austin Audit. So thank you for tuning in. And until next time, Auditor out.